Hey folks, Dave here, and I like knives. Here to talk to you today about the Spyderco Tenacious. This beautiful little blade has a blade of just under 3.5 inches, about 3.4, a handle length of about 4.5 inches, a blade width of a little bit more than 1/10 of an inch, and a weight of about 4 ounces, a little bit more than. Drop point blade, flat, perfectly flat ground. Let's start off seeing how it compares. Rat 1 and Rat 2 here, you can see that size-wise it is just a little bit bigger than the Rat 2, the bigger one. Delica and Dura here, you can see it's just a little bit smaller than an Endura, kind of in that middle range. More Spydercos with the Paramilitary 2 and the Para 3 down here. Blade length actually a little bit bigger than a PM2. Handle, just about the same size, a little bit smaller. And finishing up here with the Griptilian Mini Grip, just about the same size as the full-size Griptilian, just so you know where it kind of stands size-wise. Now, there's a lot of gold here and a little bit of garbage too. Let's get into it. The absolute best thing about this, probably, I'll go ahead and get into it, is the overwhelming variety in which this is available. Spyderco tends to be very good about recognizing which of their knives is going to be a gangbuster and just pumping out 1,000 different versions of them because, well, Spyderco likes to make money, which, you know, understandable goal. And they've made a ton of money off the Spyderco, off the Tenacious. Were you so inclined, I am convinced that you would be able to find whatever kind of handle style, material, color that you could ever want for this thing, either from Spyderco themselves, available as a stock model, or, you know, going gangbusters with this thing on custom makers and people making specialty mods. You know, kind of a cheaper knife is a great scene for modding. It's very easy to kind of pimp this out in whatever way that you want. And Spyderco does a great job of giving you that opportunity as a stock model. You want, you know, black blade green handles, yours. You want satin and pink, yours. You want carbon fiber, I'm sure that's floating around the place somewhere. Tons and tons of color-based variety. Also good is the lock bar. You can see that is, I don't even have to zoom in, man. That's a massive cutout. That is big enough for a whole glove is what I meant to say. This is so easy. This might legitimately be my very favorite liner lock to actuate because it's a generous cutout with a little bit of jimping. Not sharp, it's well chamfered, it's not gonna eat you, but you can get in there, and they even went the extra step of putting in that little cutout right there to give you an access ramp to make it even easier. I love this lock bar. 4-position pocket clip, also an absolute plus. I love it when companies give you the options of carrying it however you want. So tip up, tip down, left, right, all 4 of those are available. This is not one of those knives that you get locked into one specific kind of carry. You know, whichever kind you want, it's all yours. Which helps make this a little bit more left-hand friendly, although because it's a liner lock, it is not completely left-hand friendly. Again, going back to the variety, I'm sure that's a thing that exists, or you would be able to get it modded pretty easily. There's no way that there's not left-handed Tenacious somewhere in the world. And because this liner lock is so big, you can actually get to it left-handed, with the understanding that I cannot even properly throw a ball left-handed, just so you know a little bit about where my coordination goes. That's not even very difficult, closing this left-handed. So it's not perfectly left-hand friendly, but you can get by probably a lot better than what you're used to with a lot of other things in life. Also, ergonomics. This is a really funny thing that Spyderco does, but their knives look absolutely hideous until you put them in your hand. And then it makes sense. And that's no different here. Everything's rounded. There's only one sharp surface. Well, there are a bunch of sharp surfaces on the blade, unfortunately. But as far as everything south of the collar, it's just fine. Fits perfectly in your hand. It's very comfortable. The jimping on the back of the blade gives you a little bit of ramp. You can choke up, get up close for detailed work. Very comfortable in hand. The blade also is just straight beautiful. Full flat grind, nice satin. Good and thin, man. This thing's a slicer. This thing is wonderful. I just said that there was only one sharp surface, and that's not entirely true. Unfortunately, this thing is not very well chamfered. Their Chinese factory tends to not be very good at that, unfortunately. Part of being a budget model. But the blade, as far as its shape goes, very, very nice. You can see here, compared against the PM2, that tip is going to look a whole lot more robust and just be a little bit stronger in design because there's more material there. Going back to variety, I actually forgot to mention, and I'll try to include pictures up here, but there are a dozen different, not literally a dozen, but there are several different sizes in this singular family. Spyderco saw the success, I guess, of the Delica, Endura, and Dragonfly and went haywire on the Tenacious, the Ambitious. The Resilient, I think, is the big one. There's another one that came out just this year, I think. There's a little baby one. There's one of these with a blue handle called the Abalone. I think it's the Abalone. It'd be weird for it to be the Abalone. With a little bit different steel. Just crazy amounts of variety. You want this same package but bigger. You want this same package but little. All there. All relatively budget with, I haven't handled any of the others, so I'm not going to speak to their build quality, but similar price not similar price, but scaled price implies similar build quality, and certainly similar materials. FRN and 8CR13 MOV pretty well across the board there, except for the Abalone. Going back into it, as far as the workhorse nature goes, full steel liners. Take a look at this. Under the FRN or G10, I will say, there are full steel liners. And these things are milled. Can you see? Yeah, you can. Look at that. You see these holes right back there and there and there? Those are, and even holes back in there. You can see right there and right there and right there. Those are called milled holes, and what those are there for is weight reduction. You know, stamping out those holes does not meaningfully reduce the strength of the liners, but it absolutely meaningfully reduces the overall weight, which is very important because as it sits, this is 4 ounces, 4.1 ounces. 4 ounces for 3.5 inches of blade, not a terrible trade-off. It kind of makes me wonder what it weighed before those holes were cut. But to show kind of where it sits in its marketplace, the marketplace in which it is kind of competing, this is the Rat 1. And it has no milled liners, and it is 5 ounces. So similar size, similar blade. This is 5 ounces, so that would be the difference. Those holes, I don't know, probably about a full ounce. So those holes make it a lot more carryable, a lot more pocket friendly. Part of what makes it hand friendly is that this has a really good action. This is something that I've carried and beaten on a little bit. It's gotten a little bit rusted. I've taken it apart and cleaned it over the last several years. And it's good to go, man. There's a little bit of blade rock. It's something that I can take, I can do a better job of Loctiting. But generally speaking, this is going to open pretty well reliably. Thumb flick, Spidey flick, you're good. Slow roll, right there. The detent is not strong enough that it negates a slow roll, but it is strong enough that you are able to flick it. I love that well-dialed detent. The thing that this has meant most in my personal journey was as an entry Spidey. This is one of the... There are obviously knives cheaper than this. There are obviously Spydercos cheaper than this. Don't talk to me about the Honeybee. I'm talking about like a... Well, actually, I'm not entirely sure if of this size, of this substantiability, I'm pretty sure that this is the cheapest Spyderco on the market. Anyway, irregardless of that, this was my first Spyderco, and I hated them before I finally got this in hand. It made no sense. This is such an ugly knife. There's a big bump. There's a big hole. At the time, I liked knives that were a lot thinner. This thing's big old wide fat in the pocket. Actually, that's a meaningful dimension. You're looking at an 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 near about. That's not nothing. That's a substantial thing. That's a substantial size. Until I finally got it in hand and, oh, I get it now. And that's what this was. That's what this was to me. I carried it for a really long time, and this completely changed me around on Spyderco. So if that is something that you're feeling while I'm talking about this, or you hear people just gushing on and on endlessly about a PM2, a paramilitary 2, what I showed earlier, go find one. Go get one in hand. Put it in and out of your pocket a couple times. Play with it. Flick it. Play with the lock. It will probably make sense. This is what made Spyderco make sense to me. Now, what would make Spyderco make even more sense to me is an Andela waved coated K390, but this is what made Spyderco make sense to me at first. That's a lot of good. It's a little bit of garbage here. And to start off the garbage, we're gonna have to go back to the pocket clip. I'm a big fan of it being 4-position. That is neato petito. However, the problem is that the pocket clip does not look like this. This is a hellspawn abomination that I created. This is a Kershaw clip. I have no idea what it's off of. This was a very long time ago. The holes line up decently well. I had to drill it out just a little bit, but this is the stock pocket clip, and I don't like it very much because it bends over backwards. Well, actually, literally, it got sprung, and then I resprang it, and I bent it a little bit too far, but I don't care about it anyway. It bends over backwards to yield ground to the lanyard hole, which I don't care about. If you care about lanyard holes, that's fine, but we're different in that. And because it yields ground to the lanyard hole, this is a unique pocket clip for Spyderco, which Spyderco has a couple of templates, has a handful of templates that they use, and you can pretty well trade pocket clips, not every knife, but you can trade them pretty well between them. PM2 and Shaman, whatever. They have a general set of pocket clips. This, as far as I am aware, is unique to the China factory, meaning that I am not aware of any other Spyderco that uses it, so you can't trade pocket clips for a factory deep carry. And also, this is horrendously high carry. I really, really don't like this. I don't like satin pocket clips anyway, but this is so high carry, I hate it. Throw it away, no good. Kershaw pocket clip comes up that far, molto bene, very good. The part of the budget nature of this, like I said, this is one of their flagship budget models, and that comes with a couple of trade-offs. One of those trade-offs is, luckily one of those trade-offs is not weight. The milling that they did on the liners, excellent. However, you are trading in steel and handle materials. I answered if it was FRN or G10, but the blade is 8CR13 MOV, which is a steel that you're going to be getting on, it's the same one as a Kershaw Chill, which is like $10, versus this, which I'll talk about in just a second. So just be aware that, this isn't something that you're going to get an amazing steel, but it is a budget knife, so one of the other, there's no sharpening choil. That's a personal frustration to me because I like sharpening choils. A sharpening choil, this is an exaggerated one, but is something where you have access to the entire length of the blade. The way that this is different from the Tenacious is that you can see that the sharpened bit runs right up into the plunge grind, which runs up right into the handle. So if you're sharpening this on a flat stone or on a sharp maker or a Lansky or a fixed angled or something like that, you can sharpen 99.9% of this blade, but that last little bit you're going to struggle with. And you might not be able to get all of it, it's going to beard, blah, blah, blah. That's not a super bad thing because, you know, Mr. Spyderco has talked about it before. One of the Glessers, I don't remember. This is a very intentional thing that he does because based on his philosophy, even if this last 0.1% of the blade is not as sharp as the rest, it is still useful. The way that he says it, if you are cutting open bags, you don't want, for instance, this is a thing that has happened to me in a past life where I cut a lot of bags. You don't want to be slipping up and the material gets bound up in the choil and suddenly you stop cutting and have to readjust. With this, even if it beards a little bit, that beard will push the material back into the cutting path. It's not something that I like. When I'm cutting open bags, I'm just aware of that so I can control it. So, you know, I stopped making that mistake after a very short while, but that's an intentional thing. It's a philosophy that I disagree with, but it's an intentional philosophy, so I'm not going to detract points there. What I am going to detract points for is this thing's relevance. Spyderco Tenacious came out several years ago. Came out a long time ago. And when it did, everybody fell for it. Everybody fell in love with it. The internet blew up. Everybody was talking about a Tenacious. And, well, for good reason. It's a good knife. And it was the same price then. I mean, I've been shady with it, but it's been right there. It's about $50, somewhere between $45 and $55, depending on what color you get. Because when this came out, there was a greater separation. At least it felt that way to me. You know, it's entirely possible that I don't have the 15-year vision on this, but the way that it felt to me is that there was a separation between, I don't know, call it Kershaw and Benchmade, that there's a gap here. You know, obviously Kershaw did cool stuff and did expensive stuff, and Benchmade, they did cheap stuff a long time ago, but it felt like there was a gap there. And my understanding of the knife world is that the Tenacious came in and kind of bridged that gap just a little bit. And this is overly simplified, but shut up. And it was really cool for a long time. However, we live in a different world today than when this thing was born. Today's world is full of Civivi, CRJB, Steel Will, Kershaw, man. Kershaw is doing some crazy stuff. We live in a world where that gap is not as intense as it may have once been. And the Tenacious has not evolved in light of that. What I mean by that is that from this thing's birth till its eventual death, whenever that is, it's still a solid knife. I don't want it to go away. It has always been, to my knowledge, it's entirely possible that there's been a sprint run somewhere that I'm unaware of, but I'm pretty darn sure, that this is flat out only available in 8CR13 MOV, which is very odd, considering we're talking about Spyderco. I talked earlier about how, get it in frame, I spoke earlier about how Spyderco is so good at smelling the money. And when they release a model that, gets a little bit of hype going, they pump so much energy into it and they reap returns. Para 3 Lightweight, great example of that. It got hyped up by fans long before Spyderco even made an official statement. And that's something that in the last several years, Kershaw has been doing as well. The stock blur, the base level blur, is not so far off on price from the Spyderco. Similar size, but the blur's been done 1,000 ways. I actually just ordered one this morning, an M4, which is a KI exclusive. They've gotten into sprint runs. The dividend, it comes in how many different steels now? The SOG Flash, SOG realized that their budget model was so good that it deserved an upgrade. So they discontinued this model and just recently came out with the SOG AT, I think. I don't know what the name of their series is, but the Trident, the Flash, and the Aegis. They saw that this was a huge moneymaker for them. They had a couple of models and a couple of colors, and then they killed it, and then they brought it back, revamped it for the SOG Flash 2. Well, this is a Flash 2, but basically a Flash 3, right? And Spyderco does not seem interested in a Tenacious 2. The abalone, it's possible they intended that to be kind of but it's not. It isn't. It isn't. I've never handled one, but based on my understanding of it, it doesn't seem to be a Tenacious 2. It's just interesting to me that Spyderco is, well, very clearly they're still making money off of this. The Tenacious has a half dozen different entries in Blade HQ's top 20 sellers because this thing still makes money. So who am I to question the almighty Spyderco? It's just weird for me that they have not adjusted to fit in the market and the marketplace as it is currently evolving into. And it's possible that in the next couple of years, I don't know, Civivi Elementum, Artisan Cutlery's coming out with a lot of cool stuff, that those knives will begin to overtake the Tenacious, and where will this be when that happens? Spyderco doesn't seem to be on the forefront of getting in front of that curve. I'm sure there are American companies that are making less expensive, good, better steel models as well. I'm just not as aware of them. So this leaves me in an interesting place because this is a knife that I legitimately love. This is a good knife. Regardless of everything that I've said, this is a good knife. It fills hand, cuts well, good things. It's just, this will be an interesting thing to watch over the course of the next, I don't know, probably like 3 years, maybe less. I don't know. I'm gonna say 3. Be interesting to watch this over the course of the next 3 years as these smaller companies, these less expensive, these budget-aimed Kaiser Vanguard series, these budget-aimed brands start coming in specifically to compete with the Tenacious. The Tenacious has been king of this realm, or one of the kings of this realm, for a really long time, but if Spyderco doesn't adjust, that simply will not continue. It can't. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, CRKT Pilar, for all of Cricket's flaws, the Pilar, they smelled the money and sold out, and now they have a bigger one in D2 because they realize that, hey, we can get paid doing this. Spyderco doesn't seem terribly interested in doing that with the Tenacious, which is, there's maybe a little bit of charm in it staying true to its traditions, but I don't know. That's kind of where I sit. That's my final conclusion. Those are my closing thoughts. The Tenacious is and always has been and always will be a good knife. It's, some of its biggest flaws aren't even something that it's feeling now. But its biggest flaws, I believe, it will become more apparent in the coming years. And that'll just be interesting to watch. I don't wish bad on the Tenacious, but that'll just be interesting to watch. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or stories, let me know down below. And other than that, y'all have a great day.